Jonathan K. asks, the ending of the Time Machine movie is, in the proper original one, noted that the traveler had left for the future with 3 books missing from his collection's shelves. So, which 3 books would you take with you to rebuild society from scratch? That is, in fact, absolutely true. It's one of the most poetic moments in that tremendous, tremendous, tremendous novel in which I read in my actual school, which was an actual school where I got natural education. We read The Time Machine, we read The Invisible Man, we read all kinds of great stuff. And so he's going into the future to try to rebuild civilization that's become utterly corrupt with the Morlocks and the Eloi. And he's going to go forward in time to try to bring civilization back to these people that have returned to state of nature, basically. And he takes 3 books from the library with him. And the great thing about H.G. Wells is he doesn't tell you which 3 they are, needless to say. He lets you fill that in. It's a wonderful piece of work. Which 3 would I take? I can't name the book specifically, but I could search for them and find the actual name of the book. I would take the best medical encyclopedia I could find. The best encyclopedia that dealt with surgery, detailed anatomical drawings or pictures, remedies, how to set broken bones, all of that. The first book I would take is to take my medicine forward, because it doesn't do you any good if your people are dying at 20. This is exactly what Mark Twain dealt with in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Basically a Yankees, 1800s boss on a construction crew wakes up and he's in Camelot or whatever, and the question is, how do you build this medieval society up to modern standards? And so much was just attitude. So the first thing I'd take was a medical book. The second thing I would take is a book on engineering. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I know it would be a book on the basics of engineering. How do electrical motors work? How, and not too basic. The fundamentals of how to build things and how they work, how to test for loads and strengths of various materials and all the rest of it. So I would take medicine first, I'd take engineering second, and I'd take the complete works of William Shakespeare third, because not because it sounds like a dandy thing to do, but you realize that that Shakespeare kind of invented the modern world, and if you're going to grab something out of the past and take to the future, even though that doesn't seem to get you anything technologically, it gets you a language, and it gets you a culture, and it gets you a set of circumstances where heroism is there. It gives you a language. That's the word I'm looking for. It gets you a language. The great thing about 1984 is not all the repression. It's not all of the secret police or anything. That's what makes it ominous and scary. But the genius of 1984, the actual genius of it, is Orwell's understanding that if you wanted to control people, you had to control their language, and the simpler you could make the language, the more control you could have over people. If there's no such a word as freedom, if it's just ungood behavior, or rebellion is double plus ungood behavior, then you have a very hard time. Forget about talking about things like rebellions and freedom and all the rest. You can't visualize or comprehend ideas that don't have a name on them. And so the genius of Orwell was when he would talk, a scene where he's got Winston Smith talking to a guy who's working on the new INGSOC, English Socialism dictionary, and how proud he is that they've managed to cut 70,000 words out of this dictionary from the 6th edition to the 7th or something like that. It's horrifying and brilliant. So yeah, what have you done? I've done, double plus ungood things by, wanting to live my life or be with the person I cared about, all the rest of it. So that's it. So I would take the language forward too. Shakespeare not only takes the language with you which, by the way, and it's an entirely different subject. I've had a very cursory education in this, and I mean very cursory. I'd be interested in getting much more on this if anybody has any recommendations. But the English language is absolutely astonishing. I'm granted that its spelling is atrocious because English really came into being as a language at the time, just at the time when printing presses were starting to become sort of ubiquitous. So one printer would spell a word one way and another printer would spell a word another way, and English just kind of coalesced right at that time when there was doing a lot of translations into the printed word. And that's why English is so tough in terms of its spelling, and a little weird in terms of its pronunciation of like rough, O-U-G-H, and through, and all that stuff, all the conflicts. Everybody knows what that is. But with that said, English is a profoundly, profoundly powerful language. I think it is by far the most powerful language in the world. I'm so happy I grew up with it. I don't know how much greater the English vocabulary is than the second most populous vocabulary. I want to say English is 5 or 6 times more words than the next nearest competitor, something like that. The subtlety of shades in English, the number of different words that could be used for more or less the same thing. Now, don't jump on me here. This is my understanding, but essentially, just to make the point, essentially, in French, the words for space and heaven and sky are all the same thing because they're the thing that's above your head. But in English, sky and heaven and space are radically different, shockingly different ideas. And it's profoundly useful language for describing things. It's an astonishing language. And the more complex the language is, the more complex your thinking can be. And I've never really given that serious thought, but maybe that's why America and Britain did so well compared to China, let's say, that had civilization so many more thousands of years before Europe, and millions and millions more people. Why did the Chinese lag so far behind, especially the British speaking peoples? And it could just be because of the language. I mean, the language may just lock them into various social constraints that they may not be able to get out of. In any event, I would take the English language with me. And not only do you get the language when you take Shakespeare, you also get the sum total of human experience. I mean, every single thing. Everything that's ever happened to people from the inside is in the collected works of William Shakespeare. English is a language of freedom, says David Big Booty. He's absolutely got that right, too. David Wellman says, most English speakers know about 6,000 words. Does anybody have an idea what a good vocabulary, somebody with a good vocabulary, how many words they have? I'd be curious to know if somebody can answer that. By the way, just very strange connection. I once wondered about how many celebrities there are. How many famous people are there that you could name? Would it be 100? Might it be 200? And then I think I came to realize, just in a very odd sort of way, it's thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people that we've heard of, I think, in one way or another. It's actually astonishing because our culture is just so remarkable now. And Brent Cates points out that our language and our IQ co-evolved, and so did our hand-eye cooperation. The more we used our hands, the smarter our brains had to be. The more smart the brains were, the more dexterous work we could do with our hands. And that control of the human hands grew the brain very, very quickly in terms of evolutionary advancement, and that helped with things like intelligence and so on. For a closing question, read Susan's non-question. I don't see Susan's non-question. Let me see if I can find it. That's what I get when I take people's requests. I don't see it. In any event, yeah, that'll do it. Let's see. Yeah. There's another 20,000, says Terry Jim. I think that's reasonable. Hot Dog says, I know 3. That's just a beautiful answer. I know 3. That's absolutely brilliant. Merlin says, I took a test on that recently. I had about 34,000 word vocabulary, and they said it was top 1%. That sounds reasonable to me. I have an extremely limited vocabulary, which is why I so frequently find myself in such verbal conundrums. That's a Simpsons line or something much like that. Okay, I think that'll do it.